next panel that we have is our absolutely rocket scientist, venture capitalists, some young, some old friends. And I'm delighted that we managed to line up this incredible VC panel. Now, why is this VC panel special? The reason it is special is because they've seen they've been investing in India, they've been investing in Silicon Valley, but they also understand what role they are playing in bringing some of the the tech unicorns that we have in India exiting on a global stage now. We recognize in the Silicon Valley that those of us who are in venture capital, if we play a role, if we play our cards wisely, we will be able to play an incredibly impactful role in not just M&A kind of exits of our Indian startups, but also helping them go public on NASDAQ. Once we get to that critical mass of companies going public on the NASDAQ, on the New York Stock Exchange and so on, we are looking at a whole different paradigm of growth in Indian technology. So what I want today's panel to do is to really speak about what are you seeing as the emerging opportunities in India? What are you seeing also as opportunities for your US companies to have access to the Indian market, which is simply just going through the roof right now. The middle class is growing, and so is the digital stack. So I'm going to do something what I've never done before. I am going to palm off my responsibility as a moderator to my best friend and my favorite venture capitalist, Ashu Garg, who is here. Ashu, thank you for taking this on. He's going to be moderating this panel, which is just a stellar panel of young VCs. Ashu is the general partner at Foundation Capital. He needs no introduction. Actually, all of you know him. But I'll just say a few words. He's an early investor and serves on the boards of Databricks, Cohesity, Eightfold, Empirity, and many more. Prior to Foundation Capital, Ashu has worked with Microsoft and McKinsey and founded TringTring.com, which was one of the first search engines in Asia. So Ashu is going to be moderating a panel of some people that I know I've had for a long time. I've had as friends for a long time. And I figured there is no better way for you all who are in the, who are straddling the sort of India-US corridor to have access to these people. And I want you to talk to them after the panel is over so that, you can take these conversations further. I'm going to give the mic to Ashu. Are you here?
Well, thank you, Asha. I'm figuring this out on the fly, so my apologies if I screw up. I want to introduce Anita. Anita is a partner at GSV Ventures. Her experiences encompass roles as an entrepreneur, an investor, and as an advisor. Prior to GSV, she was an investment professional at Vantage Point Capital Partners and at several family offices prior to that. Welcome to the panel, Anita. I have Madhu next. Madhu Shalini Iyer is a partner at Rocketship VC, a Silicon Valley-based fund that invests globally. Prior to that, she was the chief data officer of Gojek and helped grow that business into a $10 billion company. Prior to Gojek, Madhu was one of the founding team members of Intuit's QuickBooks lending platform. Welcome. I have Gaurav next. Come on stage, Gaurav. Gaurav is the vice president at Galaxy Interactive. Prior to that, he was at PJC Ventures, focused on Web3 and consumer technologies, and worked at Google in the Bay Area before that, and in Sydney. He has both sort of a strong investing and an operating background, so great to have you on the panel, Gaurav. I have Vishal coming up next. Vishal, join us. He's a builder, thought leader, with a very broad spectrum of investment experiences, and he focuses very strongly on investing in the consumer and Web3 space. Excited to have you on board. And now I have my friend Sanjay. Sanjay is co-founder and managing partner of Bloom Ventures, one of India's leading early-stage venture capital firms that focuses on seed and pre-Series A investing. And as a firm, they've made over 100 investments in their 10-year history and really built sort of a strong position as one of the go-to partners for cross-border investing in India. Good to have you on board. Thanks, Sanjay. Well, why don't we start by each person maybe taking a minute or so, and we'll go around with their perspective on what's happening in the India to the rest of the world corridor. Sanjay, I'll just start with you and then go along.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ashu. And I just want to say lots of common connects here. Ashu and my co-founder and partner, Karthik, were at business school together. Lakshmi, Karthik's been an Inc. fellow, so lots of common connects. And Asha, I just want to thank you and also Ty. I just want to say something special close to my heart. I wasn't a VC when I was in the Valley for about 15 years, but before I started, lots of mentors here, Vish, Asha, Sridhar Iyengar have been very supportive. And I moved back to the US last year. We've just closed our fourth fund, close to 300 million, and Ty has been a big supporter. So from here, I just want to say thanks to everyone at Ty. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ashu, you were just asking about, So Bloom is an early stage India-focused fund. We started as a classic micro VC. We do two kinds of startups. One are 60% is on consumer, which is India for India. And the 40% kind of is really cross-border, right? Which is taking off SaaS, enterprise tech, AI. And this is just short of a 300 mil fund. We are like a pre-series, seed and pre-seed fund.
Sanjay, maybe start with one experience of one of your companies that has operated in the India-US corridor, and what are one of the insights. Just pick any one insight from that experience. What went either really well, or what was a very painful experience for you? And we'll keep it at 1 minute and sort of do rapid fire, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. The painful ones we'll keep for Friday evening, 7 p.m. Very quickly, we have a young and upcoming company called Pixel Space Tech, which is very, very interesting. They're my juniors from BITS Pilani. I think the experience that is interesting is you have built a great product in India, but you have to be close to the customers and understand what customers you want, not what you think they want. So they moved to LA to be close to the space tech ecosystem, and that's made a leaps and bounds. They've raised a round from here, and they're also working very closely with the Department of Defense here.
So it sounds like the lesson is move to the US if your customers are here. Vishal, what's one lesson you would share with the audience?
Thanks again, Asha, for putting this together. Vishal, Gurbuxani. So a couple things. When I look at it from an investor perspective, I've also operated businesses in India and also acquired businesses in India. And the thing you find really quickly is that from a cultural perspective, things that are really good is innovation and the experience and the passion. Things that are sometimes really hard is just the transparency and vulnerability. So every time we work with Indian startups, we always advise them to just be vulnerable, be transparent, and really talk about what are the metrics that matter so you can be successful. Because when they actually come out here, because we encourage people to come from India here every quarter, just spend time, understand how people brainstorm, how people actually talk about vulnerability, because that's my theme. I think that actually unlocks a lot more value, so then you can actually accelerate and start creating more value.
So Vishal is saying be vulnerable, don't fake it until you make it.
Hey guys,
Gaurav?
thanks for having me here. So we're at a fund called Galaxy Interactive. We're one of the world's largest gaming and crypto investing funds globally. We have two investments in India. One I'm going to talk about is called Leela Games. So Joakim, a wonderfully experienced games founder in the US, had massive success here and in Korea. Went to India to set up a gaming studio, trying to make a shooter game for the Indian market. The thesis here was we have the same caliber of talent that you have in the US that you have in India. You have a lot of ex-gaming studio, ex-experienced folks who've now gone back and, could be visa, could be lifestyle choices, but they've gone back and are available. And while it took a little bit of a time to build up that team, I think the kind of stuff they're producing now is on par with what's happening in the Valley. So I think the lesson that I take here is, we used to think, or a thesis was that talent is only available in the US or in Southeast Asia or some parts of Europe, but India is really budding for interactive entertainment, it's really budding for gaming, which are really software intensive and creative intensive spaces.
Hi everyone, my name is Madhu, Iyer. I'm a managing partner at a fund called Rocketship. Which I think, Rocketship India, it's I like to believe that it's been borrowed from our fund's name. I'm just kidding. We discovered India. We're a global fund. We've been investing all over the world. and we discovered India during our Fund 1 itself. So it's about a $275 million fund. First fund, Fund 1, Moglix, no broker, both large companies in India. Fund 2, we have a huge amount of Indian investments. We use algorithms to find the best companies in the world. And India started surfacing in our algos very early, 2017, 2018. And so our second fund has, Apna, Animal, Jar, Khata Book, just a Teachment, quizzes, and Raise, just a whole bunch of investments. These are fintech, these are social investments, B2B. We also invested in a space company, Agnikul, and now we are in Fund 3, and we are still seeing India in our algos, and it's very, very, it continues to be very strong. To Asha, your question, the one company that has done surprisingly well here is a company called Quizzes. Quizzes is an India-based company that is like the Kahoot. It's a quiz model. It's an education software. And right now, more than 80% of K through 12 schools in the US are using the Quizzes software. They've become profitable. It's just been an amazing journey. And so, this is really a B2B, B2C play because the, teachers use it, students use it, or schools use it. The one thing that, seems like everybody thinks that a B2B company that's building something in India, you can come and crack the big companies like Walmart's. So things like challenges. Walmart is a really large beast, and there are a lot of other corporations that are really large beasts. You can't really crack that very easily. And we have found many companies from India, really, really sort of, getting against the wall many, many times because these corporates and these corporate accounts are not easy to crack. So again, a myth that, B2B companies are the ones that are able to very quickly and easily get into the US. True, but, it requires a lot of skill.
I think well said, Madhu. Anita, I'd love for you to share your perspective as well.
Hi, everyone. Anita Rehman. I'm a partner at GSV Ventures. We're an ed tech-focused VC firm, and we have 11 investments in India. So we've bet on India very, very heavily. We share investments with Sanjay and with Madhu, and I'd say that, we started to notice the India activity. We truly believe, as the McKinsey partner said, that it's India's century and not just India's decade. So we started to notice this through our summit. We host this ecosystem platform. And in 2016 and 17, the founders of Quizzes, the founders of Byju's, the founders of all of the unicorn edtech companies in India started to visit. And we were like, okay, something's happening in India. And so we said, let's direct all eyes to India. And we started to pay attention. And with respect to your question, I think one company that comes to mind is Simplilearn, and we invested with Blackstone in Simplilearn. And what we found that it was just really incredible as to how a company from India could build a product partnering with great universities in the United States to deliver boot camps. And the product was very much what the customer wanted, but where they failed was really in the support and understanding how to support the nuances of how to address customer issues. And so we had to work through that and complement it with the team over here.
Thanks so much, Anita. I hope the rumbling is, it's a rocket ship. So, I think I've spent a lot of time looking at sort of opportunities in India, both companies that are operating and delivering value or sort of selling to customers in India, as well as companies that are built in India but for overseas markets. And I think the thing that has really changed is, as many of you have talked about, that there are now a sizable number of unicorns and meaningful companies. So, depending on how you slice and dice the data, somewhere between 100 and 120 unicorns in India. There's a sizable number of companies that have leadership teams, engineering, product development in India, but are also now starting to sell into US markets in a meaningful way, companies like Freshdesk and others. And that's been a massive change over the last decade, and it's just really the start of that change. In my experience, I do think what has been hard, and I'd love to get perspectives from folks on the panel, is that while 10 years ago, you felt like you didn't have product engineering or you didn't have product managers, and that's obviously changed in a meaningful way. You can get both world-class engineering talent, product engineering talent, and product management talent. Marketing even more than sales, continues to be a challenge because US audiences or US customers, for example, I have a company that's doing dev tools based out of India and selling to the US audience. And you would say they're all developers. Indian developers, half the developers here are Indian anyway. So how does that matter? But it is actually, their website kind of sucks from a US perspective, and it lacks, whether it's the color or the font or the choice of words. It's 100 little decisions that you make that make the finished product, think of the website as sort of the marketing, output of marketing, from a US context, even for Indian audiences in the US, it kind of sucks. I mean, that's been my experience at least. And I'm just using that as one example of things that companies still don't do well coming out of India. I don't know if anyone has any one or two examples that really stand out for them. Anyone wants to go first? Things that you think are sort of improvement opportunities for companies in India, or on the other hand, things you think they do extremely well and sort of they hit the ball out of the ballpark.
Yeah, I can take a stab at this one first. So for context, I was on the founding team of PlayStation India, so did marketing there, and then for VH1 in India. And I was also product marketing on Google Maps here and then head of growth here. So I think the thing I learned from Google was know the user, know your magic, and connect the two. I think what's hard for Indian companies with marketing in the US is we somehow don't get the user context as much if only people on the marketing or the product marketing team have only ever lived in India. I feel like there's a healthy thing to be learned from the user context, user research, qualitative and quantitative, and just the cultural context of having grown up here in the market you're selling to almost. So I feel like there is some elements of teams who've then relocated here, spent 6-7 months understanding the market deeply. And I don't just mean the Bay Area or the coast, I mean really going to tier 2, tier 3 cities in the US itself. And then taking these learnings back to India and working together to create the website, create email blasts. Simple thing like notifications. The number of notifications you get in India is like 70, 75, 80 a day. The ones you get here are like 10 or 12 a day at the max, right? Even something like that annoys the users that you have in the US. So it's a small part of, I think, the whole marketing journey, but it really illustrates how hard and difficult it is to understand the cultural context.
That's a great observation. Madhu, it sounds like you were going to add to that. Anything you would add?
I just wanted to add very quickly, and that was the context of why I said, everybody thinks that there's like a B2B opportunity that's very easy to crack. Marketing is such an important part of it, and people are struggling. The one other thing that I wanted to add is like manufacturing now is sort of, it's the elephant in the room. India is now going to become a manufacturing giant. There's a huge opportunity. Even when it comes to manufacturing, we have a lot of, China is still omnipresent. The prices of China are very hard to beat. And so how do you sort of, and it's there is vis-a-vis a little bit of marketing there as well. How do you really identify opportunities, identify categories, identify subcategories in those categories, get in front of the right audience, and then beat the prices, and then sort of continue that rinse, repeat across. It's a difficult proposition, and we are just at the, we are at the iceberg of all of these things, the tip of the iceberg. So we have still, some ways to go, but I do expect some challenges, but then a lot of opportunities to be opening up.
That's great. Anyone want to add to that before we go to the next question?
Yeah, a couple things. So actually my background's in advertising. I helped take a first company public that was on mobile advertising. What I actually found in India compared to the US, I think every country has a different types of context to touch the consumer. And India is a very message-heavy culture. And I think the big opportunity from a B2B perspective is how do you create messaging that actually scales and is very highly engaging? Because a lot of times you get these blast messages that are meant for thousands of people, but personalization actually matters a lot, right? So I think that's the first thing. I think Meta did on their earnings call, right? It's $1 billion opportunity for them just with messaging alone. I think the second thing I've also found is from a design perspective, I think India does a great job in design. The challenge, of course, is the language and context. But we have a lot of startups in my portfolio where actually now they're all leveraging GPT now, right? And actually just completely changes the game to then give people a starting ground and how to actually communicate more effectively. And I think the third thing that's also equally important is then how do you actually drive a conversion? What's the action? You'll find that a lot of times there's so much context that's just blanketed on a page. And the culture from what I've seen so far is really around, let's just tell them everything at once. And I think this concept of like going back to like, what is this magical moment that you want to give a user? And that magical moment is all that matters. And once you put them down the funnel, get them excited, and then the rest will kind of take care of itself.
Thanks so much. I want to keep moving along and change the topic. You know, one of the biggest themes these days, at least in Silicon Valley, but frankly, even so in India, is generative AI, you know, large language models, diffusion models, pick your favorite word. And that's both a huge opportunity and a huge challenge potentially for India. So I want to spend a couple of minutes digging into that and getting people's perspectives on both sides of the spectrum. Obviously, it'll create a whole new set of companies, and you know, India will sort of hopefully have sort of its share of sort of opportunity there. It will also automate potentially, or arguably automate, a lot of the low end of work that knowledge workers in India do, whether it's in BPO, KPO, and a variety of other industries. So would love to get people's perspective on that debate. You know, take either extreme side take a position either for or against. Who wants to go first? Sounds like Sanjay is ready to pick up the mic.
So, you know, this is interesting. Just yesterday, Ashu, Satya, you know, there's one Satya from Microsoft was down for a you know, private briefing with a couple of VCs, and this was very much the topic. And, you know, there's one interesting change that's happened in the India-US corridor, which is really talent. If you look at the sea change in the last 10, 20 years, like when I moved back and Karthik and I started Bloom, is you had India talent and you had US talent. You didn't have a cross-border flow. And today, when I look at my young team members, they're as up to speed, if not more, than I am. Because today, I mean, this is global. This is on the web. This is you know, doesn't really matter where you are when you're researching this. Now, you know, a lot of the innovation can also be for consumer-specific India market models, right? Not necessarily just for, you know, let's say manufacturing and robotics and AI, which are necessarily built in India for the world. So it can also impact, you know, India at scale. Suddenly we have 1.5 billion people. And, you know, we've just closed this new fund. We actually have this discussion in our team that let's go a little slow on investments, because many of the interesting big problems are going to be solved right now as we speak. And maybe the entrepreneurs in the room building it. And we said, let's go a little slow and pace our investments, because these problems are being solved right now. They're being solved both in India and here. You know, in the recent YC cohort in the batch, quite a few founders came from Bangalore and they were here in San Francisco a couple of years. Many of them, we hear the buzzwords all the time, building something LLMs, building something around generative AI, and of course, dev tools. So I think the broad, you know, well, let the other panelists also come in, is I think talent has changed manifold. We're seeing lots of young folks, of course, you know, you go to great schools, so you want to stay on the valley, but many are very, very interested in also returning back to India, like Lakshmi said, attacking really big problems there and using technology to solve them, which was not the case about a decade ago.
Thanks so much. Anita, it sounds like you have a point of view.
I do, and especially, so generative AI is something that we're watching very closely, because, you know, depending on who you speak with, they say that it's going to either obsolete ed tech or it's going to augment ed tech, right? And so we're taking the positive and optimist view that it's definitely going to augment ed tech.
Well, it made Chegg obsolete last week.
Yes. Some ed tech, let's say, most ed tech. Hopefully we pick some of the winners. But, you know, what we've seen in the past is that, so as we hosted this huge event in India earlier this year, and you know, all of the focus was on India and the business models and the new edtech companies that were coming up there. And the innovation really was on pricing, on business models. It wasn't deep tech innovation. However, as soon as we landed back, ChatGPT had gained so much momentum. And the focus now is just on this new animal and this new innovative you know, engine that's basically going to disrupt almost all of edtech. And so, you know, I think in the past we'd see business model innovation specifically for edtech in the sector that we look at. Now what we're seeing much faster is lots of AI innovation happening in India. And apparently it was a mic drop moment for Satya, again, the same Satya that visited India recently. And he saw this AI engine that was translating something that was a government plan for farmers. And we could translate it into any local language. So, you know, a farmer, a kisan, anywhere in the country.
Kisan GPT.
Yeah. Yes. So things like that are happening much quicker, and you're seeing deeper and much more robust, true innovation happening sooner.
Yeah, I think the one I think the one thing that I will just add to that is that, we've seen a lot of deep tech come out of India. When we talk about large language models, LLMs, we really need Indian language corpuses. And we know it costs a lot of money, but the context and the language is, it's going to be important. The translation bit that you just said, it gets there, but I think there's just a lot more work to be done. And we are really sort of thinking that, folks like Google will do it. Now, the one other thing that I'll add is that we are also looking to sort of India and large corporations in India having like their own VCs, CVCs, and augmenting their own teams with folks that can build such technology for India. That I think is coming. CVCs that are Indian-based CVCs of heroes of the world, Bajaj. They're investing so much in energy sectors and in every sector, fintech. I think, and even, collections and whatnot. We really do need like huge deep tech stuff coming out of India and not just working out of translations.
Yeah, I want to take a stab at both ends of the thing. I think given the entrepreneurial nature of India and the young talent that's available, I feel like it's never been cheaper to start a company, especially with all of the models at your disposal. So I think if you take 3 people, take $10,000, right, and you have, I don't think Kisan GPT took that much to make anyways, right? So I think you take 3 people, take $10,000, right? You have a germ of an idea. Now you add Copilot to that, you add like, having just the basic coding tools, not actually needing how to learn how to code today deeply. And you have a pretty strong stack tech team and a product team that's building something on the application layer pretty quickly, right? You don't really need, and I'm going to put myself out of a job here, you don't need VCs to like have and take a bet on you at that super early stage. You can actually build a working prototype pretty quickly and pretty cheaply, and then go and seek venture funding. So I think pretty optimistic on the startup layer of that. On the other side, that I'm a little pessimistic on is I think ChatGPT, agents talking to each other, might reduce the knowledge requirement of the knowledge workforce by about 30%, I think, right? Unless they actually upskill themselves. I've had everybody on my team, we are all like, as soon as you open a new web page, it automatically opens ChatGPT. It's forcing us to also up-level. I feel like unless the knowledge workers can upskill themselves on the tools that are out there today, they're going to be out of a job in a couple of years. So I feel like it's incumbent on the companies that are doing the outsourcing and the knowledge sourcing to really do that.
So Gaurav, you're going to stop hiring associates, just hire, venture GPTs.
I mean, it's coming soon.
Yeah, no, we look at it in 4 layers. So one's hardware, then second software infrastructure, third is data, then fourth is consumer experience. And you're finding disruption in all 4 layers when it comes to AI. I think the one takeaway that I've been looking at, trying to find, is companies that are looking at private and public data moats, right? When you're looking at all these GPTs or LLMs, it's all using public corpus of information. The nuance and the challenge is then how do you actually put that into the enterprise? And you can't, right? So we're actually very excited about opportunities that are looking at between the two. And what we're finding in India specifically is that it's actually hard to get data. There's a lot of data that actually needs to be cleaned. And a lot of the outsourcing teams that are already built is perfect for this. So I think India's advantage right now is to find data moats, things that are actually manual, create optimizations around, and create custom private LLMs, because guess what, over time, that's actually gonna be rented out to the companies over in America.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to switch gears in terms of the conversation. We've mostly talked about what's happening now, in the here and now, in terms of the present. I want to shift our discussion to actually doing some predictions. So, we've all got to put ourselves out there and say, what do we think is going to happen 5, 10 years out? So a couple of different questions in terms of predictions, and I'll let anyone sort of take it first. One is, what do you think is the biggest opportunity from a market segment or an insight or an idea for India-based startups, whether it's in the Indian market or the US? So pick something, like if you had to put 100% of your fund, we all bet with our money every day. If you had to put 100% of your fund, your partners would never let you do this, by the way, but if you were king or queen for a day and could put 100% of your fund into one thing, because you think that one thing is going to be the biggest thing in the next decade, what would that one thing be? Who wants to go first? Sanjay it is. Sanjay is going out there first.
I can go, and since my partner is your B-school buddy, you can convince him and you can talk to him. Couple of thoughts. I wanted to pick up something that Gaurav said about data and AI, and I'll explain. So I'll use an example. We've invested in a company called TiEcon. We think of TiEcon as a virtual cardiologist on AI. it basically has data on 10 million patients, and it essentially has an algorithm that can predict heart attacks. The same use case is used in Japan for strokes, because there, people live longer. And using this combination, if you extend that to like a pixel space tech, essentially it's a data company. It's as much a space tech company, which is building nanosatellites that can capture hyperspectral imagery. But essentially, once it has the data that can be used, for crop deforestation, for better yield planning in the Amazon, Department of Defense, ISRO uses that. If you link that with skill-based learning, just coming back to Satya's talk yesterday, he was saying that one of your advice for young folks, young professionals, is really skill-based learning, right? Which is really, the new technologies that are coming out. How are you getting up to speed on it? So if I look at the advantage that 1.5 people in India of the data that you can capture, and then you have AI models on top of it. That's not necessarily an industry-specific fund, because that can be applied to healthcare, it can be applied to fintech, manufacturing, all of it. And essentially, this is a huge opportunity for product more than services, because to your earlier point, your services companies might be impacted. People may say, hey, I've got ChatGPT, I've got AI, do I really need so many people, which is really India's advantage. But if you're automating workflow and you incorporate that technology, that's a huge advantage for products. So I would say, they sound like buzzwords, but I think just using India's data that we have and using AI models is, we're applying a lot of that.
Data AI models in India. Sound like that's your bet.
In and from India, rather, yeah.
Who wants to go next?
I would join Sanjay's fund, yeah.
Given we invest...
Sanjay, you have a new partner now.
Given we invest in interactive content, I'm going to take a bet on interactive and AI. And the reason I say that is, if you break down building a game, audio, so you need speech. I think generative audio models, companies like Breeze Speecher Labs, text-to-speech models, Resemble, they're all from India doing phenomenally well. I think you can automate that stack really well. There's actual object generation that's required within games. I think India has produced a couple of companies that are doing that really well. There's a few in this year's YC class. So we can really automate the infra stack of building the games. Some of our portfolio companies have already shown that game development talent is stellar in India, and I think for now we are a little limited by the acceptance of these games in the West, but I think in the next 5 to 10 years that will change pretty massively. All you need is one game. Take PUBG for India.
Games and AI, interactive
games and AI. Done.
I'm going to keep this moving along. Madhu?
Well, I think, when in doubt, always invest in fintech. And companies are going to be born out of this era. And I think we are looking to, so we are a fund that invests out of things that show up in our data. So we have been doing a little bit of ChatGPT type investing before that came through, and we are going to augment our models with ChatGPT, obviously. But I do think that there is just a lot of opportunity in in the subsegments of India in different demographies, and access to capital and access to money is a very big thing, and things are just opening up hugely. So fintech would be my
fintech is your bet. You're going to bet the farm on fintech. Vishal?
I think the biggest thing I've seen right now, I'm hoping the next decade happens, is outside the rise of education and hyper-personalization, it's really just coaching on what you aspire to be, right? So I almost feel like if you look at the future, you'll have the education, you'll actually have what you'll be doing, hopefully get universal basic income. Then it's like, what are you going to do with yourself, right? And I think AI actually has this idea to really disrupt how people dream, right? If you think about what happened in the 70s, everyone kind of dreamt to come to America. In the 80s, it was like, okay, what's technology? In the 90s, it was like, let's take something public. In the 2000s, it was social media. And now we're kind of in this new decade where it's really about hyper-personalization and innovation. So I think it's really about how do you customize someone's growth to really inspire to really become who they're supposed to be, right? Rather than follow someone else's dream.
Thank you. And my bet is on all front office workers, sales, marketing, recruiting. I think all of those will get automated with AI. So if you're doing something there, call 1-800-ASHU-GARG. So one last question, because I think we have a minute, and this is rapid fire. One non-consensus prediction you would make, something that most people in this room would look at and say, I don't agree, but if there's something on your mind, and we don't have to go through everybody, if anyone has a non-consensus prediction they want to make on what will happen in this India-US corridor and the startup landscape over the next decade. What do most people believe to be true that you would disagree with?
Only somewhat controversial, but I think this is
Absolutely, controversy is good.
Something I've been thinking about for the last week or so is we just don't have an M&A environment in India, right? The media celebrates like big bang exits, but the lower to mid-market acquisition is just terrible. I think it could be partly a culture problem where companies think of build versus buy, but they don't put the time value of money that companies in the valley put. So I really want to see that change. I think once the acqui-hires happen, once people are a little less fear of starting something because they know they can get acqui-hired or there'll be a small exit, they can go and do something else. I think my non-consensus opinion is that will change the next decade or so, and that's when we really see the unlock of entrepreneurship. Flipkart's done an amazing job of creating the next generation of entrepreneurs. We need 100 more Flipkarts.
I think the one thing that I really hope for is that companies that are building for India building for India. I think there's a lot of US talent that doesn't really understand how India works, and so there can be a lot of SV talent that goes back to India or that works in India. And I'm not just talking Indians, talking non-Indians as well, just the best talent, because India has a lot of deep tech companies now. We are invested in Urav Labs, which is synthetic water out of thin air, and Agnikul, which is India's first private space startup. There's just a lot of startups in India that can do with global talent, and so folks moving to India from everywhere in the world, I think it's going to happen soon.
That's a great one. Anyone else before we wrap up? Sanjay.
Now it sounds like a consensus, but we actually bet the farm on EV very early, almost a year ago, into a fund, almost scary now. And a lot of that EV is execution plays, not just high tech, and India for India, from battery swapping to battery charging. At that time it was scary because a lot of the fund was in, but it's paid off well, touch wood. So we took a controversial position and kind of wrote a EV primer, and which we're quite proud of, but it was scary then.
That's a great one. Before we wrap up, I'll sort of end with one non-consensus prediction. As most of you know, India's single largest import bill is energy. That has been sort of the bane of India's existence, sort of the imports of energy. And I'm going to predict that 10 years from now, India is going to be a net exporter of energy. And it'll be a net exporter of energy in the form of green hydrogen. But with that, thank you very much. Thank you to all of the panelists. Thank you for joining us today.